You can do the action thing, that's fun.
Action.
Hey guys! Hey guys! Welcome to Heaneys at the Movies. I'm Sam, this is Andrew.
Hi.
And we're brothers, and our goal here is just to talk about movies and find common ground, as well as kind of express our differences through the lens of cinema. So today, we're going to have our first video, might be our last, but we're going to be talking about our 10 favorite movies, using different props that we have here. So Andrew, you want to tell them what goes into picking our 10 favorite movies?
Yes. So my subjective reason of picking my top 10 favorite movies is that I always take into account several aspects of filmmaking and my enjoyment of each one. The most important by far being the script.
Yeah.
Especially if I enjoy the story, the characters, the dialogue, and everything that goes along with it, as well as the other craft things that are after the script, like directing, cinematography, sound, art direction, editing. All that stuff goes into account. Yeah. And it's mostly my enjoyment of the aspects of these movies.
Very good. It's a pretty comprehensive list. I think for me, a big thing that goes into it is emotional impact and payoff. So how much is a movie going to move me? How much does it kind of shape my life and my worldview? And also how rewatchable is it? So I think for that to happen, you have to have really good character development, character arcs. You have to have solid plot points and maybe some unpredictability in there. You have to have, I think, good culmination of franchises is also big. Music, score can really impact me, being a musician. But yeah, so basically we're going to go through our 10 movies back and forth. We'll do honorable mentions before we release our number one. We each had to find something in our house that we felt like represented the movie that we were picking, and we only picked one from each franchise. So there's only going to be, if we have Star Wars, there'll only be one Star Wars. So yeah, let's get started. Alright, Andrew, you want to start us off with your number 10?
Yeah, my number 10 is represented pretty easily by this Batman.
Star Wars?
Yeah, if I was subverting your expectations.
Ah, nice. I get that.
But seriously, it's The Dark Knight. This is easily my favorite superhero movie of all time. It not only is the most complex, in my opinion, out of all the Batman movies in all those things I mentioned earlier, but it also has a true understanding of Batman as a character. And also, who doesn't love Heath Ledger as the Joker?
Yeah, he bodied that. He did so good.
You want to see my magic trick?
I'm gonna make this pencil disappear. It's gone.
So what's your number 10, Sam?
So this was the hardest prop for me to find in our house because we don't have a lot of farm animals, but I found a wolf that I'm pretending is a dog because my video is about my favorite sheepdog of all time, and that's Babe. So if you haven't seen Babe, it's about a pig that learns to sheepdog over in New Zealand, and it's just a fantastic movie. I think everything about the characters is fun, likable. It's just such a pure, fun movie that I think people of all ages can enjoy. And that last scene is just incredible. I think the way that they have the pig come in to do his performance, and everybody in the crowd is just absolutely laughing. They're like, what's this pig doing trying to herd sheep? And then that changes to complete silence when they see him executing it out, and then finally it's sheer applause when he finishes it. And when he's done his thing, it has one of my favorite lines of all time, where his owner says, "That'll do, pig.
That'll do."
Yeah, it's great for me. So that's my number 10. So for my number 9, Aslan is on the move. Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe for me is such a good adaptation of one of my favorite books by C.S. Lewis. This book is basically a portrayal of the Christian faith through the lens of fantasy and a children's story. And I think this movie did such a good job with telling that story in a very impactful way, whether it's the music or the acting, and the animation was way ahead of its time. You'll see the clips that we kind of roll through here, but for 2005, Aslan looks so realistic. And again, this movie just moves me, just seeing that story kind of played out, and the battle scene at the end is fantastic. The way you have the good Narnians versus the evil White Witch's army, and they have every type of animal and every type of fantastical being going at each other with the music and with the lines that are played in there. It's just incredible. And Liam Neeson does a great job as Aslan. Only saw it 6 months ago was the first time I actually figured out that that was Liam Neeson. I watched as a kid and had no idea, but pretty fun. It was a good one.
Yeah, that's a great explanation and a great choice, Sam. For my number 9, I picked this Nerf gun as a prop because it kind of looks like the guns that are used in this movie. It also looks kind of sci-fi, so My number 9 is Blade Runner 2049.
Good choice. That's a good one.
I was considering picking the first one, which I also really love. But one is not only a perfect sequel in almost every way to the first one, but it also has probably the best cinematography, art direction, and visual effects, and to a lesser extent score, than almost everything else on this list, in my opinion. And when I first saw it, I was invested from beginning to end, and it's my favorite style of a substance movie. What's there not to like?
Yeah, it's a good choice. So tell us about your number 8, Andrew.
So for number 8, I picked this 90s looking car to represent Pulp Fiction.
Oh, I got that.
What a quotable movie.
What? Say what again? Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker.
Even not taking the dialogue into account. The non-linear story and editing, I think this is one of the few films that does that I actually really, really love. And think is done really, really well. Also the music, especially the music actually, the directing style from Tarantino, everything is done perfectly. But beware, it's not for everyone.
Oh yeah, that one scene.
Which scene? Oh.
Yeah, you know.
Yikes.
Yeah, so for my number 8, I got this drum set because I picked Whiplash. So if you haven't seen it, it's an incredible movie about the relationship between a coach and a motivator versus a young person trying to achieve success. And I think it really dives into the investigation of the consequences of trying to be the best and what comes with that. And I think they do a really good job of showing the drive of the drummer. I think it's hilarious for us too because that intense, emotionally abusive instructor that we see J.K. Simmons play looks a lot like the band teacher we had in middle school, Mr. Costco, and he sometimes would lose his temper. So I think that's really funny. And having been in the high school football setting, I've seen like what it looks like for coaches to be kind of in that power role where they overtake it. So for me, that made it super relatable, and the score and the tension and everything else in the movie is fantastic. I think it should have won Best Picture, but that's just my opinion. My number 7, I'm going back to this guy over here, Mr. Batman, but I'm not doing Dark Knight because I like to be a little different. I'm picking Batman Begins. I feel like this is a better Batman movie. I think of Dark Knight as a really good Joker movie. I think that this really ties into Batman's original arc. It ties in all the different origin stories from the comics really well. It makes it believable, and I think the shift you see in the culture of Gotham from him being held at gunpoint by the mob boss and the police chief doesn't care to the mob boss is caught and arrested and he's invested in Rachel and Gordon and all the other good people and giving them power to kind of turn the tide. I think it's really well done. I think Ra's al Ghul is believable. I think his romance with Rachel is good, and again, it just has some really good scenes and quotes, like, I'm Batman.
Yeah. My number 7, I picked this alien-looking creepy crawly
I see what you did there.
Because my number 7 is Alien, which is easily my favorite horror movie.
Okay.
Obviously, the best part of this movie is the iconic chestburster scene, which, don't worry, I will not show it. It's also the memorable characters, and also the way it adapts from the typical horror movie trope and structure, like from Halloween, which came out a year earlier, and other earlier horror movies. And it's just so creative, yet so simple in its design and its structure. It's really well done. I love it.
Nice choice. Tell us about your number 6.
So for my number 6, out of respect to what happened, I decided to not have a prop for this movie. The film is Schindler's List, directed by the masterful Steven Spielberg. This is such a depressing movie. There is no way I can watch even a scene of this without either being on the edge of my seat or crying my eyes out.
Yeah.
And as dark as it can be, and as depressing as it can be, because it's about one of the most darkest moments of our entire history, the theme of it having just a glimmer of hope throughout the movie, especially at the end, after everything is done, where it converts to color from black and white. Cool. It's done just so beautifully. It's one of the most touching things I'll ever feel in my life.
Okay.
Also, Liam Neeson as Oscar Schindler, what a brilliant character. I just want to say that.
We've already had 3 Liam Neeson cameos in our countdown, so yeah, we have. He's doing something right. Alright, so for my number 6, this might be my most favorite prop, because here we have a Christmas golden retriever. And here's how this connects. It's not Air Bud, but you got Christmas lights because this is a Christmas movie, and this dog represents our dog, Bailey. Bailey, George Bailey. This represents It's a Wonderful Life. And so I love this movie. Again, it's rewatchable, it's quotable. It's something that we watch almost every Christmas Eve. It transcends the lifespan, and you see how George constantly is making sacrifices for other people. And I think that the way he does that is so selfless, and he's not really looking for anything in return. So when it comes around to where he is able to get that return from people, when he actually needs something, it is just so moving and emotional. And the romance is good, the music's good. I think also for being from the 40s, I think the movie is just so ahead of its time in the way that it films and the dialogue and the characters. Okay, so now we're getting into the top half. We're at number 5, and for my 5th, I picked episode 5 of this series, Empire Strikes Back. Did you have it too?
Yeah.
Wow, we both had Empire Strikes Back as number 5, our first overlap of movies. So yeah, I mean, what couldn't you say about this? I think it's the best Star Wars film. When you think about plot twists, this is the first movie that comes to your mind, and that's one of the most important aspects of cinema is the plot twist, and this does it so well. I remember watching it and not having an idea that it was coming, and my mind was just blown. It was so well done. I think they do such a great job with the 2 different character arcs of Luke, and then you see the Han and Leia and Chewie crew, and they both just capping out their stories really well. I think Yoda's brought in really brilliantly, and I just think everything about it is really good. Anything you want to add?
One of the reasons why we both think it's better than A New Hope and later Return of the Jedi is that in A New Hope the characters are annoying, here they're not, and it's also much darker than Return of the Jedi as opposed to the cuddly Ewoks in Return of the Jedi. Yeah,
I just think they just hit their sweet spot here of everything being developed and coming to the major head of what makes Star Wars Star Wars.
I completely agree.
Yeah, so now we're at number 4, Andrew. Tell us about yours.
So my number 4, I know this is a zebra, but it's supposed to be a horse. It looks like a horse. To represent the most iconic scene in The Godfather.
What a heavyweight.
Yeah, it's interestingly enough, it's actually very early on in the movie, this iconic scene. But the reason why I picked it, I mean, I should get this out of the way, it's the best movie I've ever seen. One of the reasons why it's not my number 1 is because unlike some other movies that are just as long, 3 hours, if not even longer, is that it does feel like a chore to watch, sometimes. But what I especially love about this movie, aside from everything that people have already said, is that the characters are so fleshed out and so interesting and so developed, is that you could imagine them doing anything throughout the entire movie. And I just think that is brilliant.
Alright, it's time for my number 4.
Why do you have a calculator sound?
What does that say?
Oh, that gets me. I love you 3000.
3000, because my number 4 is Avengers Endgame. So this only came out 2 months ago, but it already has a place in my heart. I got to see it in the theater twice, and I think for me, when all of the people come back in the portals, that's one of the biggest payoff moments for me and emotional impact. I think the way that this film encapsulates 22 movies and 10 years of a Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it ties up everything so well in a way that really truly subverted your expectations. Because within 5 minutes, what I thought was going to happen was just thrown out the window. And I was just taken on a ride for 3 hours, and it was fantastic. I think we see with a lot of these big franchises, whether it is The Sopranos, whether it's How I Met Your Mother, or Game of Thrones, whenever there's a big expectations building on the end of the series, oftentimes they don't know where to go with it. They don't know how to make fans happy, while also not being predictable. And I think Endgame knocked that out of the park. And they tied in things. One example of how they tie things together is in the first Avengers movie, we see Captain America and Tony Stark talking, and Cap tells Tony, he says, "You're not the one to make the sacrifice play." And Tony tells him, he says, everything special about you was made in a lab. And if you've seen the movie, you know that they both do things that completely change and flip around that statement, which I just think is brilliant. And I like that there's real consequences. Like, it's not just perfect happy ending. Like, there's real consequences to what happened that are going to affect the MCU going forward. So yeah, that's my number 4.
Yeah. So Endgame is my favorite MCU movie, easily actually.
Yeah.
And what I like the most about it, aside from what Sam has already said, is that it's a culmination of 21 other movies. And it's just done so well. And speaking of culmination, my number 3...
The Proposal?
No.
27 Dresses?
No.
Big fat Greek wedding?
Oh no.
Why do you have a wedding ring then?
One ring to rule them all.
Oh.
Lord of the Rings, The Return
Obviously.
of the King.
Yeah, extended version, right?
Yeah.
Good. Only way to do it.
Again, this is a culmination of two other brilliant movies. Each one just as emotionally investing as the last. And just everything is just so emotional.
Yeah.
And the ending with Frodo, and in fact before that when Aragorn says, for Frodo, holding that sword and doing his last stand, that is just so, and after that, Sauron's death, it makes me want to stand up and cheer every time. It's just so well done, and amazing, dude. How did this film get it so right with a $94 million budget?
Wait. You're telling me that this had a $94 million budget, the 13 Oscar-winning film, and Justice League had a $300 million budget?
Oh, don't remind me.
Oh my gosh. DC sucks. What?
Yeah, it does. Pretty much.
Alright, so for my number 3, I tried to find a box of chocolates, but our parents are really healthy in this house. So instead, what I did is I took a soldier from Vietnam and I took its legs off, because here's Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump. Similar to It's a Wonderful Life, this movie takes us across the lifespan. It does an incredible job. I love it too because I'm a big U.S. history fan, and we watched this in our AP U.S. history class, and seeing how they kind of put a different spin and a twist on all the different historical points from the 60s and 70s and 80s, I think was really phenomenally well done. I love the, sorry to ruin your Black Panther party, and all these other quotes that you have. Forrest is such a likable character, and it kind of makes sense how everything happens, and it shows too that life has real consequences. Him and Jenny don't have this perfect relationship, and even when they do kind of get back together, her old life kind of catches up to her in a lot of ways. And yeah, I think of all the movies we picked, I think the argument can be made that Tom Hanks' performance here is the strongest performance as a single actor of any of these movies, which is cool, because fun fact, our mom actually went to the same high school as Tom Hanks and had the same drama teacher, because she did acting at that school. Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So for my number 2, I actually have 2 props.
Ooh, two props. How about that?
A chimpanzee observing the monolith.
Oh.
Representing 2001: A Space Odyssey. Where to begin with this movie?
Tell us.
Look, I could go on and on about how brilliantly and beautifully crafted this movie is. From the music to the sound design. To the Oscar-winning effects, to the brilliant symbolism on humanity as a species. But instead, I'm gonna go over how I feel while I'm watching this movie.
Good call. Yeah.
It makes the slow pace and the symbolism and the killing sound design. It just makes me feel hypnotic.
Yeah.
Through the whole movie, and by the end of the movie with the Star Child scene, it just makes me feel both enlightened and more intelligent by the end of the movie.
It's a good way to say it, yeah.
And it's just, also, HAL 9000 is the scariest character and the scariest performance I've ever seen. Don't at me.
Alright, so for my number 2, USA. USA. USA! So this M, we're filming this right after 4th of July. This M stands for Miracle, because my favorite sports movie is Miracle on Ice from 2005. It's based on the 1980 U.S. hockey team as they defeated the Soviet Union in the Olympic Games. And I think what makes this the best sports movie is, yes, it has that cliche happy ending like all sports movies do, but for this one, it actually happened. All the scores from all the games are the same. Everything's kind of kept verbatim as it happened in real life. And so to see this true David versus Goliath story that had a huge historical impact as well, when you think about where we were at with the Cold War at that time, they just did a great job of bringing that to life and making you kind of they made you feel like you were in there. I mean, they literally had the same play-by-play announcer, Al Michaels, come back and play-by-play in the movie, just like he did in the actual game.
That's really fascinating.
Yep, and they had a whole crowd there, like they filled up the arena like it was real fans, so it's not fake cheers, like they actually had people cheering. And also the hockey's real. A lot of sports movies, like you see, Dennis Quaid being an MLB pitcher, or Ryan Gosling playing linebacker for a movie. Like, oftentimes, they don't actually pick athletes, they pick actors and pretend that they can play the sport. But for this one, every actor that had for this movie had to do a hockey tryout and skating test to make sure that they were at an adequate level of hockey. And then when they were training for this movie, they spent 9 months doing 2-a-days where they would lift, train, skate in the mornings, and then do filming and acting at night. So when you see that suicide scene where they're all skating back and forth and they throw up, that's real. They actually had the players do that for a whole day. And so it makes the movie so much more believable when you have real hockey players kind of doing every part of the movie. So that for me, Herb Brooks is a great performance by Kurt Russell. So it's my favorite sports movie.
That's a great choice, yeah.
Yeah, so now it's time for our number one. So we're going to do honorable mentions first. So my honorable mentions, I got Princess Bride, I got Toy Story, and I got Gladiator. So these are all very different, but I think they're all just great movies. I think Princess Bride makes fun of the classic romance and has a lot of quotes that are great. And then you got Toy Story, which was a classic for us. We were probably watching it before we could walk. And still that franchise is holding up to this day. And then Gladiator is just a great war movie about a really redemptive hero. So
my honorable mentions, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so my honorable mentions are The Big Lebowski, Hot Fuzz.
Hot Fuzz.
And Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Hot Fuzz.
Yeah. Big Lebowski, in my opinion, is the Coen brothers at their best. Hot Fuzz is just hilarious. Every time I watch it, there's a new detail. And Raiders of the Lost Ark is just a blast from beginning to end.
There you go. All right. It's time for our number one movies.
Yeah.
So, can I guess what your number one is, Andrew?
Go right
I think
ahead.
I know. I think, you know, he never stops talking about this movie. It's his favorite ever. I think it's got to be, it's Suicide Squad. No?
No, actually.
So what is your favorite movie then?
My favorite movie of all time is represented by this little toy sword, Seven Samurai. Came out in 1954.
Ah, just last week.
Yeah. This movie is so brilliant and beautiful that words cannot describe it. Despite being over a half hour longer than The Godfather at 3 hours and 27 minutes long.
Oh, that's long.
It never feels like a chore to watch. Every scene, every moment, every line of dialogue, every shot means so much. All of it is important. Very important. The film's message about bringing people up rather than tearing them down is beautiful. It also has my favorite character of all time, that of Kikuchio, played brilliantly in my favorite performance of all time by legendary actor Toshiro Mifune. Heck, all the acting and all the characters are phenomenal.
That's awesome.
And Akira Kurosawa, the director of the film, his way of filming action holds up to this day. And so there's no surprise as to why this is my favorite movie. Also, everything else is done brilliantly. Like with the cinematography, every shot is in focus and everything is just done so well. I love this movie.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Alright, so my number one, also a ridiculously long movie, and one that we've talked about.
Is it Phantom Menace?
I should have done that, but I didn't. I think Jar Jar Binks is just too good for this list. But besides that, I have to go with Lord of the Rings, Return of the King as well.
Wow.
Because again, I just think this movie was done so brilliantly. Andrew's already harped on what makes this movie so great. I think for me, what I would add is that, for those of you who don't know, J.R. Tolkien, the writer of Lord of the Rings, and C.S. Lewis, the writer of Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, they were friends. And they had a good bond, and I think you can see the themes of their stories come together. And J.R. Tolkien's actually a World War I veteran. And I think he brings that perspective into writing how Frodo is going to handle coming back home to Hobbiton after he does his quest. And you see how when you have these different moments that are supposed to be really exciting and celebratory, he's unable to really smile because of all of the trauma that he's been through. And I think that they touch on that brilliantly. It has a lot of endings, but I think every single one is important and needed because when you have such an epic story and series, you have to tie it together well and put every hole. And there's just so many parts, whether it's the Eagles, whether it's the Riders of Rohan coming through, whether it's Aragorn with that famous line he has at the end that makes him a great king, to the Hobbits, and just all of it comes together so well. It's really easily rewatchable for me, and I think it just is the encapsulation of my favorite trilogy, so it has to be number one.
I completely agree, Sam.
Yeah, so that's our stories. I hope you liked it.